This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're exploring education and immigration issues here in New York. And our guest is State Senate Education Committee Chair Shelley Mayer, a Westchester County Democrat. Thanks for visiting us in the studio, Senator.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with state education aid, which, unlike some years, is a relatively innocuous topic this budget season. And it's no surprise that the state Senate, as well as the Assembly, are looking to come over the top of the governor's initial $27 billion proposal as it pertains to foundation aid, which is how the bulk of education dollars are distributed. You're looking at another, I think, $285 million or so. Do you have anything specifically in mind with that increase or the overall increase in support for education, or is this just a more general boost?
I've met with districts, small, large, rural, urban, suburban, and they're all facing some very significant headwinds. Notwithstanding, in some cases they have a decline in enrollment or they have other challenges. One is significant increase in students with IEPs or special needs and the costs associated with those students. Yesterday I met with a district, 25% of the incoming kindergarten class has an IEP, a small rural district. So one is that. Two is increasing health insurance premiums that they can't put in a reserve. They have to pay them, and this year they've been way above the cost of inflation. Utility rates that we're all complaining about, they have them too. And the fourth is expectations that schools are more than 8 to 2:30.
Sure.
The community school model, the very supportive school model, particularly in uncertain times with either poverty, immigration issues, an uncertain environment has made schools a centerpiece for kids' emotional and mental health that costs more for schools. So schools are really feeling the pressure. The governor started with 1%. We were pleased because we were worried it was going to be 0, but it's not enough. I don't think our 2% is enough. I wanted more than that. I wanted some additional changes in the formula. We made some modest ones in our one house. I think we're going to have to deal with the additional costs of special ed. We did put in some additional weighting for English language learners, particularly in our city school districts, and for homeless and foster care kids who need also significantly more from a school. The requirements on schools are far greater than they ever were. And even with some declining enrollment or changes, schools are facing significant headwinds.
You mentioned that idea of changing the formula or how we distribute dollars. Clearly, there's no big push right now for a wholesale change in the formula. So where do you think there could be some tweaks around the margins, at least in this year's budget process?
Well, I think a few things. As I said, I mentioned the English language learners.
So it's being responsive to those demands.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to see more special needs. Foster care and homeless youth. Over 100,000 children in New York City live in temporary housing. Those kids have significantly greater needs. I think we have to look at this health insurance premiums. I'd like to see some effort to give schools the ability to meet the premium without going above the tax cap. That's the challenge they face. And in some of the poorer communities or in some of the urban communities, you just can't keep going above the tax cap. In my district, I have some homes paying $50,000 a year in property tax. $50,000. It's unbelievable to many people. These are more affluent districts. And I have poor districts where they've gone above the tax cap. It is a challenge. And so we have language in our One House saying we're open to continuing to modify the Foundation Aid formula, which was created a long time ago, 20 years ago. We made some changes last year, but we need more. It's not timely.
You mentioned the local tax burden, which makes me think of the campaign right now to change the retirement benefits for teachers that have been hired in the last, say, 15 years or so. Doing that, though, while maybe would make the profession more enticing, would potentially drive up costs for local school districts. So what sort of appetite do you have for changes in this year's budget? Would it primarily be around the margins with maybe one or a handful of the different components that are being discussed right now, like an earlier retirement age, like a lower contribution towards retirement, or increasing the pension benefit? Or is none of it necessarily on the table because you don't want to drive up costs for local districts?
I think it's on the table.
Okay.
I think it should be on the table. It doesn't mean we can't negotiate to do something affordable. Police and fire overtime, huge issue in my district. Like 3/4 of these departments are Tier 6, and they're up there with the guys who are Tier 5. It is hard to recruit. It's hard to keep people in. The overtime cap, which affects them, is one component of the Tier 6 request. The teachers have as you said, a age retirement issue. CSEA has a different one. I'm hopeful that the different requests we can get to a point that are acceptable changes, but really public service should be something people want to do, people are committed to, they're going to stay in it, and we have to make it attractive. Otherwise, people aren't going to choose to do it. And we see it up here. We need people who are willing to do these jobs. Your pension is not gigantic. If you have worked here as a CSEA employee, your pension is $40,000-$50,000 plus Social Security. So we need to make these good jobs with a good retirement. That is why we get people in public service. And many of them do it really out of their desire to serve the public. I don't want to discourage, I want to encourage that.
Can those incentives, though, be provided without passing along costs to local governments, to local school districts? Is there a mechanism that you see for the state potentially shouldering those costs?
Well, in a perfect world, yes, but we're not in a perfect world. So we have to figure out how to do it and not kill our property taxpayers, which, as I said, I'm very sensitive to. As well, we did propose an increase in revenues at the higher margins. And I have some constituents who would face that. But bottom line is people got, at the highest margins, got a very generous tax break from the Trump proposal. And frankly, the state needs additional money. And we lost all this money because of federal cuts. So are we going to have to do it and try to minimize the burden on property taxpayers? Yes. And also on middle income people. Poor people and middle income people cannot pay significantly more.
Well, before we move on, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with State Senate Education Committee Chair Shelley Mayer, a Westchester County Democrat. I want to turn to another big topic in the budget, which is this idea of making pre-K more accessible in New York. And the governor has laid out this vision of universal access by the 2028-2029 school year. But I know there are especially some suburban lawmakers who would like to see a faster timeline and also maybe a little bit more done outside of New York City. So what do you think is poised to be done in this space, and what do you think you're going to be pushing for in this area, potentially maybe to advance the governor's timeline?
Well, not only the governor's timeline, but to her credit, she significantly increased the reimbursement to $10,000 or another computation number, whichever is higher. So at least $10,000 per student for full-day pre-K. Let's just talk about the burden on regular families with young children. You have a 4-year-old, you're working. You live in the city of New York, you get full-day pre-K, quality pre-K for that kid, and you don't have to pay. You live across the border in Mount Vernon, Yonkers, or Hempstead, you're not entitled to it as a matter of right.
Is that a product, though, of the commitment that New York City has made to this? It almost seems like the state is matching what the Big Apple is willing to do, and then you have local communities and school districts outside of New York City where maybe they're not willing to pony up the same way that New York City is.
Well, it's not only the pony up for the parent. Mm-hmm. That's the second part of it. These kids come into kindergarten better prepared when they have full-day pre-K, as opposed to spending the day on the laptop or tablet watching TV. And given the challenges of our kids in schools, we need kids to enter kindergarten prepared. So I believe we are going to move to universal pre-K for the whole state. I think the governor has opened the door for that. We've been pushing for that. We gave money to districts, and they left it on the table.
Sure.
They don't want it. They can't do it. The space is too small. The reimbursement's too small. She doubled the reimbursement. I think we need to have flexibility in how it's rolled out. She gave a 2-year timeline to get to it. And it's not universal. It's not like kindergarten. It's only for everyone who wants it. So let's say a third of the kids in a district want it. They have to have seats for a third of a kid. Using flexibility and a little bit of initiative, school districts can do this. And they should do it. It's really the wave of the future for good outcomes for teachers, for students, for families. So I think it's a very winning strategy. I give the governor credit. We want to make it work, though. We want these schools to take the money and implement the program. I've fought with several districts across the state that are not in a hurry to do it, and they don't like it being imposed on them. Honestly, as someone who deals with them, schools have to rise to the challenge of this moment. I know they might have to, for example, not have as many coaches in their award-winning softball team. That might be a problem for their parents. They like that. We have a social responsibility to get to these kids at 4 and bring them along so they're prepared for kindergarten. They need to know how to hold a crayon in kindergarten. And I hear repeatedly that kids come into kindergarten now not prepared. It's a little bit of the COVID situation, but it's more than that.
Well, sticking with, I guess, the idea of early childhood more broadly,
Yeah.
there was an assumption that after the governor made her big announcements with the New York City mayor, that there would then probably be a pendulum swinging back a little bit with the members outside of New York City saying, great, what do we get? So what else do you think is going to be going to members like yourself, I guess, or more specifically, your districts, that maybe wasn't initially part of the governor's budget, but will be part of a final budget, because this is a give and take?
I think we need a more organized plan for rolling out 3K. I think her proposal was 3 pilots. It was sort of divvied up according to where I think they thought they could implement it quicker. That doesn't mean where it's needed the most. I think we need a more thoughtful, organized way to expand 3K and then 4K. 4K, she already put her finger on the scale. 3K, we got to move ahead. But it ought to move towards a universal 3K. The city's going to have it. Mondani's just put more money in it. We're not going to have it right away. I recognize that. That's okay. We need to move towards it in a way that covers everyone. Rural communities, suburban communities, urban communities. The big 5 school districts in New York have more than 50% of the kids of New York. So we have to make sure that we're dealing with the range of different kinds of schools, different kinds of needs, and we get to a full 3- and 4-year-old over the next few years.
Is there anything specific that you're going to be looking to give some of those big city school districts outside of New York City in this budget? Does any new demands on them presented recently, whether it's maybe chronic absenteeism and the problem that has presented, or something else?
There's a number of things for them. For the Big 5, or so-called Big 5, it's actually more than that now.
Yeah, we had, like 6 school districts testifying this year together?
In the Big 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Mount Vernon was not in the Big 5, and they got in. But
big in the eye of the beholder, I guess.
Okay, so as I said, we're changing the foundation aid formula that significantly benefits the Big 5 or urban districts. We are proposing to change the law about transportation aid, that in places where there's a view that public safety limits the ability of a kid to walk a certain distance, we are changing that distance so that more is reimbursable. So if you need a bus for a mile walk or anything over a half a mile, you would be able to get reimbursed if there's deemed to be a safety risk. We've done that for a number of cities. We're expanding to the Big 5. We are allowing transportation aid for pre-K. That would be a big lift. I don't know if it'll survive. We're trying to increase building aid reimbursement for the Big 5 so that their ratio is higher than it currently is. Like Yonkers, I know, is about 70, and Buffalo is about in the 90s. So Yonkers has challenges financing the building of a new school for the communities that need it. So we've done quite a bit on the trying to be attentive to the Big 5. And certainly in the city of New York, which we're not particularly talking about, we're trying to drive additional money to the New York City School District.
Well, let's turn to immigration. And I'm curious, where do things stand with the Senate's working group on immigration? And in terms of ideas that are percolating, do you think you have anything that's going to be ready for prime time in the near future?
I do. I'm very committed to it personally. I represent Portchester, Mamaroneck, New Rochelle, White Plains, Yonkers, all communities with a significant number of immigrant communities, working communities, where either ICE or DHS or somebody has already been in the mix. I've been on the phone with teachers whose kids were taken out of the community who were in school. I don't want to overstate. I've been involved with there was a mother who testified recently up here about her son young son was taken on a way to church in Portchester. He's in Louisiana. This is very, very real to me. And so I have a school bill, as you know, that really requires schools to have a universal policy, to have a great deal of clarity about what ICE can do in a school without a judicial warrant. New York for All, we're really going through it and trying to reach consensus. But I'm a supporter of New York for All. I think there's a range of things, and we have to do them. We don't have any choice. The moment is now, in my opinion, and I'm very intentional. And I appreciate that the leader opened the door with her statement on the first day that we were going to do something close to New York for All, and I believe we are. We're trying to get agreement with the Assembly and the governor, and that's a process. I'm not in the middle of it. I don't think we have a choice.
Do you anticipate this being something that is attacked on a three-way basis, or could this be something that the Senate and Assembly negotiate together, pass as a standalone bill in the coming weeks, and then negotiate from there with the governor?
I don't know. I'll tell you my 3 points.
Sure.
Has to be a bill that will pass both houses and be signed. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in performance here. We got to do something real. Secondly, it has to be real and not give false promise, but actually change the way our current situation is in some of our communities. And 3, it has to be as constitutional as possible so that it does not get struck down in court. Those are my 3 guiding principles myself, and I think many in the conference share my view.
And with regards to New York for All, are there elements of it that have been deemed maybe not workable, and that's what needs to be sort of focused on in terms of getting that ready for the floor, or is the focus more about coming up with something that you can have a comfortable vote margin on that people are willing to support?
I actually think neither of those are the problem.
Okay.
I think the issues are what we're seeing in our districts, we want to have reflected in the legislation we pass. So some of the things I'm seeing are not expressly referenced in New York for All. The local police departments sharing information or databases. I want to make sure the bill that we pass captures the situation I see and the frustration of my constituents and my businesses who are hurt by this. So it is the effort to do the best we can and reach all the challenges that our people are facing and our communities are facing. You got these communities that are so significantly immigrant-based, particularly in the suburbs of New York, and this is really hurting our communities significantly. People aren't going to send their kids to school, going to go to work, aren't going to be in the cash economy, aren't going to pay taxes, all these range of things. So I want as much covered as possible. So I think we should think expansively. In New York for All is a good draft. It's a good bill.
And you think all of those goals can be accomplished without, say, undermining the effort to potentially keep communities safe as it pertains to people who are here illegally, maybe stay past a visa or whatever, and do represent a criminal threat to a community?
I think the issue of criminality is front and center in our communities. People do not want criminals on the street. They do not want people who engage in criminal conduct. There are some people who say that should be determined after a trial. That's what due process means. There's some people who say, no, that doesn't really apply if someone is here unlawfully. I think these are the kinds of things we have to work through. I'm very mindful of how people feel about it. I think our due process is a very fundamental premise in our country. But that being said, there are times when people feel someone committed a heinous crime and they shouldn't be here. That may be a different story. So we're discussing these things, try to reach consensus. I'm very confident we will. We have to do it. We have to do the right thing and do the fair thing and do the American thing, which it is a country based on due process.
Well, finally, Queens State Senator Mike Gianaris has announced that he's leaving office at the end of this year, and that's an interesting change because he currently serves as Senate Deputy Majority Leader and runs the political arm for the state Senate Dems. So I'm curious, because your name is tossed around there, not just in the voices in my head, any interest in either being DSCC Chair, Senate Deputy Majority Leader, or maybe both?
Well, I am very focused on the budget, and the little notebook in front of me, and the immigration issues, and a range of other issues that we didn't talk about, including the MIF fund, which is a big deal for me. But all the issues about families, kids, unions, the actual people I represent in my district from Yonkers to Pound Ridge, who I see every day, that's my focus on getting a budget that is best I can for them and getting our schools as safe as I can for all the kids in my district and all the kids statewide. So my focus is on that. When we finish the budget, we can go to Plan B. Right now I'm on Plan A.
But safe to assume you feel like, if asked to serve, you could take on any or all of those roles.
I am a very loyal member of our conference. I have been for a long time through many ups and downs. I have incredible respect for the majority leader. It's nice that she comes from Yonkers, and we've campaigned together many times, but I have confidence she'll make good choices, whatever she does.
Well, we've been speaking with State Senate Education Committee Chair Shelley Mayer. She is a Westchester County Democrat. Senator, thanks for visiting us.
Thank you for having me.
And for more Capitol Press Room content, visit capitolpressroom.org or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.